Pain is supposed to bring a person down, but my pain is the opposite. It's about to bring them down. Because while my own children were whispering and plotting to leave me writhing in pain to seize my inheritance, my fingers silently pressed the record button. My name is Susan, and I'm 72 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting here revealing this story. But if there's one painful lesson I've learned in my twilight years, it's this. Sometimes the person you trust the most is the one who stabs you the hardest. Before I tell the details, I'd like to know where you're following this story from. Please leave your city or state in the comments. Knowing I'm not alone, knowing this story might touch someone out there, brings me immense comfort. Now, let me take you back to 15 months ago, when I was diagnosed with severe spinal stenosis. If you haven't heard of this disease, consider yourself lucky. It's a condition where the spaces in the spine narrow, directly compressing the nerves. The pain, it's truly indescribable. Some days it feels like red-hot nails are hammered straight into me lower back and down my legs. Other days, I can't even stand straight. My doctor, Mr. Morrison, prescribed a special painkiller. Not the kind you take and forget, but a very strong one, with strict warnings and a rigorous dosage schedule. But it was the only lifeline keeping me going. Without it, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't walk, and certainly couldn't take care of myself. At that time, I had been a widow for 8 years. My husband, Frank, passed away after a sudden heart attack, leaving me with our house in Riverside, California, a substantial amount of savings, and several investment properties we had accumulated over the years. Frank and I had built this life from scratch. We married in 1975, with 2 children who had just graduated from high school, big dreams and empty wallets. By day, Frank worked as a construction worker, and by night he attended vocational school to get his subcontractor's certificate. I worked as a waitress, then started catering small parties on weekends in the cramped kitchen of our rented apartment. We saved every penny. In 1982, when Frank got his subcontractor certificate, we bought our first house. It was an old, dilapidated house in Riverside that he renovated himself. I still vividly remember him working diligently until midnight, determined to transform it into the perfect home for our family. My catering business grew slowly but steadily. Word of mouth in Riverside carried significant weight. Before long, I was hosting weddings, career events, and anniversaries. Frank's construction company also flourished. We weren't rich, but life was comfortable and secure. In 1995, we bought our first rental property, a small duplex needing renovation. Frank used his free time to renovate it, and we rented out both properties. Then a second in 1999, a third in 2004. Each was carefully selected, meticulously renovated, and tightly managed. These weren't get-rich-quick schemes. They were our retirement plan, our safety net, built over decades of hard work and sacrifice. But Frank never got to enjoy his retirement. A heart attack struck in 2017, without warning. One minute he was healthy, the next he was gone forever. The doctor said it all happened so quickly. He did, but I did. I still do. We have 2 children, our eldest son Derek, 45, and our youngest daughter Nicole, 42. Derek lived about 20 minutes drive from me with his wife, Amber. He worked in sales, though he changed jobs faster than I changed my bedsheets. He was always chasing the next big opportunity, the promotion that promised to solve all his financial problems. Frank, during his lifetime, was always worried about Derek's instability, about his extravagant spending habits. More than once, we had to step in to rescue him from the mire of debt. Sometimes his car was repossessed, sometimes he was late paying the bank. We never asked for a single penny back. He was our son, after all. Amber, his wife, didn't work. She spends most of her time at yoga studios and nail salons, at least from what I know. She drives a BMW that we financially supported her purchase. They have 2 teenage sons I rarely see, and grandchildren who are always too busy with sports or friends to visit their grandmother. Nicole lives closer, just 10 minutes from my house. She's a dental hygienist, divorced 5 years ago from a cheating husband. I've been there to support her throughout that divorce, both in terms of, and, steadfastness. When Frank died, Both Derek and Nicole seemed devastated. They handled the funeral arrangements, stayed with me through those first horrific weeks. Derek took care of the paperwork, and Nicole stayed over many nights when I couldn't bear the loneliness. I think the grief brought us closer together. I think losing Frank reminded them of the meaning of family. I was wrong, terribly wrong about so many things. When I received my diagnosis, they were both incredibly worried. They offered to take me to the doctor, do my grocery shopping, and get my medication for me. Derek even suggested I give him a key to the house in case of an emergency. I gave him the key without a second thought. Looking back now, I can see exactly when things started to change. It was very subtle at first. About 6 months after I fell ill, Derek started inquiring about my finances. "Mom, have you got everything organized? I mean, just in case something happens. Are your accounts all in order? Have you thought about updating your will?" I brushed it off, telling myself she was just worried about her mother. That's natural. Then Nicole started to, "Mom, managing all that real estate with your condition must be exhausting. Have you thought about selling some of it? Or transferring ownership to us to make things easier?" Of course I have a will. Frank and I made one years ago. Everything is divided equally between Derek and Nicole. The house, the savings, the 3 rental properties. Everything is neatly split in half. Fair and square. But I'm still alive and well and have no intention of going anywhere anytime soon. About 3 months ago, things took a turn for the worse. My pain got worse, much worse. Dr. Morrison adjusted my medication, increasing the dosage slightly. He also prescribed physiotherapy and suggested lifestyle changes, but the medication remained the chain holding me to life. I kept the medicine bottles in the kitchen cupboard, right next to the coffee maker. It was the same familiar spot for months. I took my medication regularly at fixed times, morning, afternoon, and before bed. That schedule was unbreakable because the pain was relentless. Then one morning, I went to get my medicine and found the bottle almost empty. I swear I'd just gotten a new dose 3 days earlier. I counted the remaining pills. Only 4 were left. That was ridiculous. There should have been at least 20. I must have miscounted at the pharmacy, I reassured myself. Though deep down I knew I hadn't. I called to request more medication, but due to the nature of this type of medicine, I couldn't get more before my scheduled appointment. The pharmacist looked concerned but firm. "Mrs. Patterson, this is a highly controlled substance. Your insurance won't cover a new prescription for another week. And even if you pay out of pocket, the system will say it's too early." Those were the 6 longest days of my life. The pain was unbearable. I had to ration the remaining 4 pills, breaking them in half, and extending the time between doses as much as possible. I barely slept, couldn't move. I spent most of my time lying in the armchair, trying to hold back the tears. Derek and Nicole visited during that time. I told them about the missing pills and the pain I was in. Derek frowned. "Mom, are you sure you remember? Sometimes people get the dosages wrong when taking these kinds of medications." Nicole nodded in agreement. "That's right, Mom. It's easy to get them wrong, especially when you're in pain. You might have taken more than you think." I knew I wasn't mistaken. My mind had always been as clear as a mirror. I knew how to count pills. But their certainty made me doubt myself for a moment. When I finally got the new pills, I almost cried at the pharmacy counter from relief. I went home, took a dose, and carefully put the bottle back in the kitchen cupboard. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time I knew for sure something was amiss. I counted the pills obsessively. I knew exactly how many were in the bottle. When I opened it, 1/3 of the pills had evaporated. Someone was stealing my pills. But who? I lived alone. The only people with a key were Derek and Nicole. The only people who visited regularly were Derek and Nicole. My own children. No, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. There had to be another explanation. I decided to test my hypothesis. I moved the bottle to another cupboard, the medicine cabinet in the upstairs bathroom. I didn't tell anyone. I counted carefully, exactly 32 pills, then wrote down the date and the number in a small notebook. 3 days later, Derek dropped by unexpectedly. "I just stopped by to see how you're doing, Mom," he said. then kissed my cheek. He went into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. I watched him intently from the armchair in the living room, where I lay with a heating pad pressed against my back. He stayed in the kitchen longer than necessary just to get a glass of water. When he came out, his expression was strange, confused, and a little irritated. After he left, I went upstairs, slowly and painfully crawling up each step. I opened the bathroom cabinet and counted 32 pills, still intact. It was clear now, it was him, or Nicole, or both of them. They took my medication to force me to live in pain, to make me weak and vulnerable. But for what? I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't helpless. The pain may have ravaged my body, but my mind remained sharp. If my children were stealing the drugs, they must have a purpose, and I would expose that purpose. I ordered online a tiny voice-activated recording device, disguised as a pen. Since I couldn't drive myself to buy it anymore, it could record continuously for hours and had a very long battery life. I also bought a larger recording device to hide discreetly. I put one in the kitchen, hidden behind a cookie jar on top of the refrigerator. The other I hid in the living room, tucked between books on a shelf. And the recording pen was always in my jacket pocket whenever one of them visited. For a week, nothing happened. Still the same normal conversations, the same familiar greetings. I started to think maybe I was being paranoid, that there might be another reason. Then, everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had just taken my medication and felt the pain subside noticeably. I lay in the armchair, half asleep, when I heard the front door open. Derek called out, "Mom, are you awake?" I squeezed my eyes shut, keeping my breathing steady. The medication really did make me drowsy, and I'd learned that sometimes pretending to rest was better than forcing myself to stay awake and talk. "She's fast asleep," Derek said, "but not to me." Nicole's voice replied, "Perfect. We need to talk." My heart raced, but I remained still, breathing slowly and evenly. The voice recorder was in the pocket of the cardigan I was wearing. I heard them go into the kitchen. "She won't last much longer like this," Nicole said. "Have you seen how much weight she's lost? She can barely walk." "That's exactly what I wanted," Derek replied. His voice was cold and calculating, a stark contrast to the dutiful son who had been so worried about his mother just the day before. "The worse her condition gets, the easier it is for her to agree to sign the changes. And I'm sure the medication reduction is working, right?" "Of course it's working. Don't you see her? She's desperate, in constant pain. A few more weeks like this and she'll sign anything you ask." I felt a chill run down my spine. They were doing this on purpose. My own children were deliberately tormenting me, heartlessly watching me suffer physical agony. "I still think we should have talked to her directly about amending the will," Nicole said, her voice trembling slightly. Derek chuckled, a cold laugh. "Right? Let her divide everything up again. Nicole, those 3 rental properties alone are worth over $2 million. At this house, the savings, the investments, we're talking nearly $3.5 million in assets. I'm not going to split it 50-50ths when I'm the one handling everything. You handling everything. I'm the one who comes here twice a week. I'm the one researching care centers, the one working with lawyers, the one outlining this whole plan. Do you think Mom will easily hand over legal representation to you, just because you bring her a few bowls of soup?" "Wake up." There was a silence. Pain is meant to break a person. But my pain is the opposite. It's about to break them. Because even as my own children, the ones I gave birth to, stood at my bedside, whispering and plotting to abandon me in agony, and force me to sign over all my assets, my finger had already secretly pressed the recording button. My name is Susan, and I'm 72 years old. To be honest, I never thought I'd have to sit in front of this camera to expose such a dark corner, such a bitter family tragedy. But if there's one hard-won lesson I've learned in all these years, it's this. Sometimes the person you trust the most, the one who shares your blood, is the one capable of stabbing you with the most fatal and deep wounds. Before delving into the horrific hidden aspects of this story, I'd like to know where you're watching this video from. Please take a few seconds to leave your city or state in the comments. In this dire situation, it's a great comfort to know that I'm not alone, and that my tearful story might resonate with someone out there, someone who might also need a wake-up call. Now, let me take you back in time to 15 months ago, to the moment I received my chilling medical diagnosis. I have severe spinal stenosis. If you haven't heard of it, thank fate and consider yourself lucky. It's a terrible condition where the spaces inside the spine gradually narrow, creating tremendous pressure that directly compresses the central nervous system. The pain truly is beyond words or dictionary comprehension. Some days, it feels like someone is hammering red-hot nails into me lower back and dragging that agonizing electric current down both legs. On other days, my body would stiffen to the point that I couldn't even stand up straight to pour myself a glass of water. My specialist, Dr. Morrison, looked at me with concern and prescribed a high-dose, specialized painkiller. This wasn't the usual kind you take and forget about. It was a highly potent, specially controlled medication, with bold warnings about side effects and a strict minute-by-minute dosage schedule. But at the time, it was my only lifeline, keeping me alive. Without it, I would suffer from chronic insomnia. I wouldn't be able to walk a single step. And certainly, I would be completely helpless in caring for myself. When the illness flared up, I had been a widow for 8 years. My husband, Frank, passed away after a sudden, devastating heart attack, leaving me alone in our family home in Riverside, California. Along with a substantial amount of savings and several investment properties we had painstakingly acquired over the years, Frank and I had built this life from scratch. We married in 1975, 2 young children fresh out of high school with big ambitions and empty wallets. By day, Frank worked as a construction worker under the scorching sun, and by night he diligently attended vocational school to obtain his subcontracting certificate. I worked as a waiter at a local restaurant, and on weekends I took on catering for weddings and small parties in the cramped, smoke-filled kitchen of our small rented apartment. We carefully saved every penny. It wasn't until 1982, when Frank officially obtained his contractor license, that we were able to save up enough money to buy our first house. It was a dilapidated, heavily damaged old house in Riverside that he personally renovated day and night, tearing it down and rebuilding it brick by brick. I still vividly remember my husband toiling, sweating profusely, working by the oil lamp until late at night, determined to transform that ruin into the most perfect home for his wife and children. My catering business also developed slowly but steadily. Word of mouth carried weight in Riverside. Before long, I had enough credibility to bid on large weddings, corporate events, and wedding anniversary celebrations. Frank's independent construction company also began to flourish. We weren't the typical tycoons, but life was very comfortable, secure, and free from financial worries. In 1995, we decided to buy our first rental property, a small duplex that required a lot of renovation work. Frank used all his vacation hours and few weekends to renovate it, and we rented out both apartments. Then a second one appeared in 1999, and a third in 2004. Every brick, every square meter of land was carefully selected, meticulously renovated, and strictly managed by us. It was absolutely. He suffered a great deal of physical pain before he passed away, but I suffered even more. That emotional pain lasted, and even now it still gnaws at me. We had 2 children together, our eldest son Derek, now 45, and our youngest daughter Nicole, 42. Derek lived about a 20-minute drive from my house with his wife, Amber. He worked as a sales agent, although he changed jobs faster than I changed my bedsheets. He was always talking about the next big opportunity, the promotions that promised to solve all his financial troubles. Frank, while he was alive, was constantly worried about Derek's volatile temperament, his extravagant spending habits, and his tendency to overspend, to show off. More than once, my wife and I had to dig into our pockets to rescue him from his mountain of debt. Sometimes it was a car repossession due to late installment payments. Other times it was a mortgage debt so overdue that it almost led to the foreclosure of our house. We never once asked for a single penny back from him. We told ourselves, he's our son, our own flesh and blood, so we have to protect him. As for Amber, his wife, she absolutely never works or lifts a finger. She spends most of her free time at fancy yoga studios and expensive nail salons, at least from what I've seen and heard. She drives the luxurious new BMW that we, the old couple, had to finance and guarantee for them to buy. They have 2 teenage sons, but I rarely see them. My grandsons are always busy with sports tournaments or hanging out with friends, never having an hour to visit their old grandmother. Nicole, my youngest daughter, lives closer, just a 10-minute drive from my house. She's a cleaning specialist at a dental clinic, divorced 5 years ago from her terrible ex-husband who cheated on her repeatedly. I was there for her, supporting her through that tearful divorce, providing both financial and emotional support to help her rebuild her life. Initially, Nicole seemed much more caring and devoted to me than Derek. She visited me regularly twice a week, calling constantly every evening to check on my health. Occasionally, she would buy some necessities, bring food, and sit with me in the living room watching our favorite cooking shows on TV. I was once choked up thinking that all of that stemmed from pure familial love. I was so naive and foolish. Nicole has a single daughter named Emma, who is studying environmental science at a prestigious university in Northern California. Emma is incredibly intelligent, compassionate, and ambitious, truly unlike her mother or aunt. She calls me every week, just to chat, to tell me about her classes, essays, and new friends. She reminds me of myself in my 20s, full of hope, independence, and unwavering determination. When Frank died, both Derek and Nicole were devastated and heartbroken. They eagerly helped me with the funeral arrangements, stayed by my side, and held my hand through those first few weeks of horror and emptiness. Derek handled some of the complicated legal paperwork. Nicole even stayed overnight at my house for several nights in a row when I couldn't bear the loneliness of being alone, without my husband. At the time, I secretly thought that this immense loss would at least awaken them and bring them closer together, closer to their mother. I thought the loss of their father had reminded them of the sacred meaning of family. But I was wrong, terribly wrong about so many things in life. When they received my spinal stenosis diagnosis, both of them were extremely worried. They vied with each other to take me to my doctor's appointments, to do grocery shopping for me, and to proactively pick up my medication at the pharmacy. Derek even thoughtfully suggested I give him a spare house key in case of an emergency. I gave that key to my son without a moment's doubt or negative thought. Now, sitting here piecing together the whole tragedy, I can see exactly when their personalities began to rot and change. Things were incredibly subtle and delicate in the beginning. About 6 months after I became ill, Derek started subtly asking strange questions about my finances during meals. "Mom, have you organized and systematized all your paperwork? I'm asking just in case something unexpected happens. Are all your bank accounts stable and clear?" And so, I endured the 6 longest and most horrific days of my life. The physical pain exceeded all human endurance. I was forced to ration, breaking each of the 4 remaining pills in half, trying to prolong the time between doses as long as I could bear. I was practically sleepless, unable to move or stir. Most of the time I just lay curled up in the armchair in the living room, clenching my teeth to prevent the screams from escaping. During that dark period, both Derek and Nicole came to visit me. I painfully told them about the mysterious disappearance of the pills and the terrible torment I was suffering. Derek frowned, his expression thoughtful. "Mom, are you sure you remember and controlled it well? Sometimes, when using these strong painkillers, patients easily experienced hallucinations, confusion about the dosage, and temporary amnesia." Nicole, standing beside him, nodded vigorously, agreeing with her brother. "That's right. Mom, when people are in peak pain and their minds aren't clear, it's easy to overdose without realizing it. You might have taken more than you think." I looked at my 2 children, a strange feeling of unease welling up inside me. I knew I wasn't mistaken. My mind had always been clear and sharp, like a mirror. I knew how to count my pills, and I controlled my life very well. But the resolute attitude and unwavering certainty of my 2 children made me momentarily doubt and reproach myself. When that terrible week was over and I finally got my new supply of medication, I almost burst into tears at the pharmacy counter, feeling like I'd been saved from the brink of death. I rushed home, took a dose to quell the looming pain, and carefully put the bottle back in its place in the kitchen cupboard. But just 2 weeks later, that horrific scenario repeated itself. This time, there was no room for self. I obsessively counted the pills, counting them over and over again before putting them away. I knew exactly how many round pills were in the bottle. When I opened the lid to check after a day, a third of them had vanished without a trace. Clearly, someone was secretly stealing my medication. But who could it be? I lived alone in this house. The only people with a spare key to the door were Derek and Nicole. The only people who visited me regularly, who came and went freely in this kitchen, were Derek and Nicole. My own children. No, a mother's bruised heart refused to believe such a crazy thing. I didn't want to and couldn't believe such a cruel truth. There had to be a more logical explanation, right? To prove I wasn't insane and to test the hypothesis, I decided to conduct a test. I secretly moved all the painkiller pills to a small cabinet deep in the upstairs bathroom. I kept it absolutely secret, not uttering a word to anyone. I counted carefully. There were exactly 32 pills in the bottle, then meticulously recorded the date and quantity in a small notebook I always carried with me. Exactly 3 days later, Derek unexpectedly dropped by without any prior notice or call. Unlike usual, "I just stopped by to check on you, Mom," he said sweetly, then leaned down and planted a kiss on my cheek. Afterward, he casually walked straight into the kitchen, saying he wanted to pour himself a glass of water. From the armchair in the living room, where I lay motionless with a heating pad pressed against my lower back to ease the pain, I silently watched his every move through the small mirror in the corner. He stayed in the kitchen much longer than necessary just to pour a glass of water. And when he returned to the living room, my son's expression was incredibly strange, a mixture of confusion, annoyance, and disappointment clearly visible in his eyes. Immediately after he said goodbye and drove away, I gathered my remaining strength, slowly and painfully clinging to the stair railing, crawling up the stairs one step at a time. Trembling, I opened the bathroom cabinet, emptied out the pills, and counted them. 32. Still intact, not a single one missing. So, all doubts were answered as clear as day. It was her. Either Nicole, or both of them conspired together. They deliberately reduced my medication to inflict excruciating pain, pushing me into a state of physical and mental exhaustion, turning me into a weak, vulnerable old woman, completely incapable of resistance. But what was their ultimate goal? I may be old, but I'm not stupid, and I'm absolutely not a helpless wretch. Pain and illness can ravage this body, weakening its bones.
"They'll be here in about 10 minutes, Patricia said while rearranging the files on her desk. "Are you really ready, Mrs. Patterson? I've been waiting and preparing for this day for weeks, lawyer." Derek was the first to appear, followed by Amber in her stylish outfit. He entered the room and seemed a little surprised, pausing briefly at the extremely formal setting and the serious, cold atmosphere. "Mum, I didn't think signing these papers would be such a grand and elaborate meeting. How are you feeling today? Are you all right?" "I feel much better, dear. In fact, my mind has never felt so clear and sharp," I replied calmly. He leaned down and placed a kiss on my cheek, and I had to brace myself to let him do it. Amber sat down in the chair next to her husband, her face showing clear signs of anxiety and boredom. She didn't even greet me, instead constantly glancing at her phone screen, obviously wishing she were at some fancy nail salon instead of this dreary meeting room. Nicole arrived 5 minutes later, profusely apologizing for being late. "I'm so sorry, everyone. The traffic was terrible today. A terrible traffic jam. I'm so sorry, Mum." She even leaned down to kiss my cheek. And I swear to God, I had to use my last ounce of strength to keep myself from slapping my youngest daughter and pushing her away. She quickly settled into her seat, calmly smoothing her shirt, preparing to play the role of a dutiful daughter, the last dutiful daughter of her life. Once everyone was seated, Patricia slowly walked to the head of the meeting table, facing us all. She wore an incredibly elegant charcoal grey business suit and possessed an aura of authority that commanded respect and focused attention from everyone in the room. First of all, thank you to all the family members for taking the time to be here today. As you have been informed, Mrs. Patterson has proactively requested my assistance in handling some extremely important legal procedures related to her estate planning and personal assets. However, before we proceed with any formal signing of documents, there are some ambiguities that need to be brought to light and clarified in front of everyone here. Derek immediately leaned forward at the conference table, a confident, professional salesman's smile spreading across his face. Yes, of course, Ms. Attorney. Whatever my mother needs clarified, we are ready to cooperate. My brother and I are here to help her in any way we can. I sat silently, watching my son display his feigned concern and empty filial piety in front of everyone. He did it too well, too professionally. Years of sales training had taught him how to read people's minds, how to utter sweet words that precisely conveyed what the listener wanted to hear. But unfortunately for him, his elderly mother now held the naked truth. Ms. Patterson, would you like to explain the whole situation yourself, or should I represent you legally? Patricia gently turned to me, her eyes filled with respect. I looked at my two children, really looking deep into their very nature. Derek, with his perpetually confident smile, utterly certain of his absolute victory in this gamble. Nicole, with her feigned anxiety, her fingers frantically tapping her phone's timer, as if she had some important appointment looming. And Amber, still glued to her phone screen, completely oblivious and bewildered, oblivious to the terrible storm about to engulf her family. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with courage. This was it, the decisive moment, the moment I had been building up for weeks, suppressing my pain and resentment. I know everything you two have been doing behind my back, I said calmly and gently. The entire vast meeting room seemed to freeze instantly. Derek's confident smile suddenly froze, distorting noticeably. What, Mum? What are you talking about? I'm saying I know all about the dirty tricks you two conspired to pull behind my back. Withholding my painkillers, planning the scam, trying to get me committed to a mental institution, everything. Nicole's face instantly turned deathly pale, drained of all colour. She glanced frantically at her brother for help, then immediately turned back to me with trembling eyes. Mom, I really don't understand what you're talking about. Mum must be having delusions again. Let her suffer a little longer, I said calmly, quoting my daughter's exact words. My voice was firm, clear, and composed, despite the turbulent waves of resentment surging within me. She'll soon break down and sign over all her assets to us. The silence that followed was truly terrifying and suffocating. The smile on Derek's face vanished completely. His facial muscles shifted through a range of horrifying emotions, from astonishment and shock to realization, to a profound fear that began to engulf his eyes. Nicole gripped the edge of the mahogany table with both hands, so tightly that her knuckles turned white and trembled uncontrollably. Those are exactly the lines you two were saying, Derek. From me and Nicole, a verbatim quote from a secret conversation in Mom's kitchen exactly 3 weeks ago. A fateful conversation where the two of us discussed secretly stealing Mom's painkillers, forcing her into a life of misery with physical pain, and planning to brazenly steal everything she owned. Mom, you're really crazy. You're not thinking straight, Derek stammered, trying to defend himself. but his voice was weak and lacked its usual assertiveness. "I'm not crazy, and I've never been lucid." My voice was so sharp and forceful that both of us flinched, recoiling backward in our chairs. Amber finally looked up from her phone screen, her eyes wide with shock at the tense atmosphere. "I'm 72 years old, and I have this terrible spinal stenosis. But that absolutely doesn't mean I'm a stupid old woman, and it certainly doesn't mean I'm deaf, and it definitely never means I'll sit idly by while my own children torture and abuse me for dirty money." Patricia slowly opened her leather briefcase and pulled out a small electronic device, placing it on the table. "Mrs. Patterson has deliberately recorded the entire confidential conversation mentioned above. Do you all wish to listen to what you said yourselves?" "No!" Derek almost shouted in panic, interrupting the lawyer immediately. "That's completely unnecessary. I'm absolutely certain this is just a terrible misunderstanding, some baseless speculation on my mother's part." Patricia didn't bother arguing. She calmly pressed the play button on the device. Immediately, the voices of my 2 children filled the entire meeting room, crystal clear, indistinguishable and undeniably distinct. "She looks terrible. She won't last much longer if this continues. Have you noticed how much weight she's lost lately? That's exactly the goal we need to aim for. The worse her physical condition becomes, the more muddled her mind gets, the easier it will be for her to agree to our proposed changes to her will." I sat quietly, intently observing the expressions on my children's faces as they were forced to listen to their own cruel words, the plans to torment their mother. I saw the confident, polished mask of a salesman on Derek's face shatter into pieces. His jaw clenched, his hands gripping the armrests of the chair as if to crush them. I saw Nicole's eyes blur with tears, though even now I couldn't tell if they were tears of genuine shame and remorse or simply overwhelming fear of the legal consequences she was about to face. She hastily raised both hands to cover her mouth, as if that action could help her retract the venomous words echoing and condemning her in the courtroom. "Master!" And Amber's face at this moment had changed from the shock turned into utter horror and disgust. She stared at Derek, her husband, with an expression as if she were looking at a monster, a cold-blooded stranger she had never met before. When the recording reached the part where the 2 brothers discussed their plan to forcibly admit me to a psychiatric hospital and falsify medical records to prove I had senile dementia, Nicole couldn't bear it any longer and let out a choked, painful sob. But Derek remained motionless, like a rock, his face expressionless, his eyes darting around, clearly his calculating brain still searching for a way out, a next move to defend himself even in this dire situation. The cruel recording continued to play steadily. Their voices permeated every nook and cranny of the mahogany meeting room, shattering any pretense or sense, leaving no room for denial. How many more years does she have left to live comfortably? Why should we be so foolish as to wait until that fortune is completely depleted and nothing is left to inherit? When the final sound of the tape faded, a suffocating silence enveloped the room, a silence so oppressive it could drive one mad. Patricia calmly pressed the power button to turn off the device, picked it up, and placed it neatly in the center of the meeting table, right in front of my 2 children. Amber slowly rose from her chair, clutching her designer handbag to her chest like a shield, her voice trembling violently. I need to leave here immediately." Her voice was hoarse with shock.
*, they'll get their rightful inheritance after we're gone. Right now, the ultimate goal is to secure our own financial future. Amber's been nagging and pressuring me for months about upgrading to a bigger mansion in the wealthy neighborhood. And you've been complaining and feeling ashamed every day about driving that old beat-up car to work. This is our jackpot, understand? All right, let her endure it a little longer. Nicole finally chimed in, her voice full of resignation and complicity in the evil. She'll soon give up and sign everything over to us. Afterward, they continued to discuss in the kitchen for another 10 minutes about the specific details and terms, which new lawyer to use for maximum discretion, how to structure the transfer of representation, and which assets to dispose of first, to avoid high taxes. Every word, every sentence, every sneer of theirs was recorded perfectly by my hidden recording devices. Every nook and cranny, every step in the cruel plan of these biological children was captured with absolute clarity and authenticity. When their footsteps faded and the front door slammed shut, signaling their departure, I remained motionless in that armchair for another hour. It wasn't because I was suffering from back pain, nor because of the sedative side effects of painkillers, but because I was in a state of shock. My limbs trembling, my heart shattered, and a profound, desperate grief that felt as if Frank had just died again right before my eyes. These were the children I had carried for 9 months, the children I had stayed up all night caring for when they had high fevers, the children I had loved more than my own life and raised with the best education. I had given them everything a mother could give. Frank and I had tightened our belts to pay for their expensive college tuition, provided substantial down payments for their first homes when they started families, and always been there to be their saviors through every milestone and every major and minor financial crisis in their lives. And this is how they chose to show filial piety to their elderly ailing mother. But as the initial shock and choked tears subsided, a completely different emotion powerfully emerged within me. It wasn't furious anger, though my heart burned with hatred, nor was it weak hurt, though this emotional wound was deeper and more painful than any physical injury to my spine. It was a clear-headedness, a cold clarity. I spent that entire night, sitting alone under the dim light, wearing headphones and listening to the recording dozens of times, my purpose being to ensure my ears weren't deceiving me, to make sure every accusatory word they uttered was clear, distinct, and undeniable. Yes, there was no mistake here. Every word was irrefutable evidence, every sentence the most vile condemnation. The very next morning, at dawn, I immediately called my lawyer, but not the veteran family lawyer we had trusted for decades, because Derek had mentioned him by name in a confidential conversation, proving that my son had secretly approached him and tried to bribe or entrap him beforehand. No, I proactively contacted a completely new law firm, meeting with a woman named Patricia Hoffman, a renowned expert in senior protection law and large-scale estate planning. Her office was located in downtown San Diego, far enough away that Derek and Nicole would never accidentally run into each other, or speak to each other. Miss Patterson. The lawyer's voice rang out seriously on the phone after I briefly summarized my critical situation. I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. And remember to bring all the equipment containing the original audio recording. It took me 2 days of rest to feel strong enough to drive a long distance. During those 2 days, I began implementing a strategy of hiding my painkillers in a completely new location each day, constantly rotating between different rooms and locked cabinets that only I knew about. And as expected, the painkillers stopped disappearing completely. My physical pain gradually returned to a stable state of control, and when my body was freed from the torment of the pains, for the next busy week, Patricia and I worked tirelessly together day and night. We drafted a completely new will to replace the old one entirely. This new will not simply remove Derek and Nicole from the list of primary legal heirs. In its opening clauses, it clearly stated the reasons why they were all our real estate, bank accounts, and accumulated assets were restructured. My entire estate after my death would be divided into 3 equal parts. The first third would go directly into a secure trust specifically for Emma, Nicole's daughter, and this fund would be locked until she officially turned 30 to ensure her education and future. Emma has always been a good, affectionate girl who has never shown the greed or selfishness of her mother and aunt. The next third will be donated directly to reputable local charities, a shelter for women who are victims of domestic violence, a food bank for the poor, and a fund supporting patients at the major hospital where Frank was treated in his final days. The final third, I have decided to use entirely to establish a scholarship fund named after Frank, dedicated to supporting generations of underprivileged students who aspire to pursue careers in crafts, construction, and engineering. My Frank will surely be smiling happily in the afterlife knowing this. As for Derek and Nicole, my two beloved children, each will receive exactly $1 in inheritance, along with a copy of the original audio recording and a long personal letter I wrote myself, meticulously explaining why they are completely excluded from their parents' lives and legacy. But a new will still wasn't enough to protect me completely from their schemes. Patricia also helped me establish an irrevocable trust for the entire system of rental properties, legally separating them from my personal estate so that no one could dispute or sue later. She went on to establish a comprehensive healthcare mandate with a reputable third-party trustee, ensuring that in the future, neither Derek nor Nicole would have any legal authority to make medical decisions or interfere with my treatment. She also helped me create a complete evidence file, a log of missing pills, specific dates, and the pattern of the thieves' appearances. Now, Patricia looked at me meaningfully. The most difficult psychological test for you is coming. We need to pretend nothing happened, and let them believe that their plan is on track and they are winning. For the next 3 weeks, I braced myself to play the role of a frail, pitiful old mother, exactly as they expected. I deliberately called them less often, my voice weary. I intentionally moved more slowly and shakily whenever they visited. I complained more about my excruciating back pain, my senility and confusion, and how managing the house and land all by myself was too much for me. Just as we had predicted, Derek immediately seized the opportunity during dinner. "Mom, I really think we need to sit down and have a serious talk about finding someone to manage and help you. Maybe someone you really trust to help you with finances, real estate, and remind you about your medication and doctor's appointments. Lately I've noticed you've been quite forgetful and confused. Am I really that forgetful, son?" I looked up at him, deliberately making my voice tremble and sound a little bewildered. "Yes, Mom, a lot. But don't feel ashamed. It's not embarrassing at all. Everyone goes through this phase at this age. But I'm your son, and I'm worried about your future." Looking at its seemingly sincere face, I couldn't help but shudder in horror. It was truly a born actor, a masterful con artist. If I hadn't personally overheard that cruel audio recording, this elderly mother might have been moved to tears and blindly believed its sweet words. "I don't know, Derek. Since your father passed away, I've always managed everything myself. I know, Mom, you've worked so hard. But wouldn't it be much easier and more comfortable for you if someone else stepped up to take over? Someone you can completely trust. I can handle everything, big and small, for you. Just the two of us." "I can't." I knew absolutely nothing about this crazy plan, Mrs. Patterson. I swear to God I knew absolutely nothing about the dirty tricks they were pulling behind your back. She turned to look Derek straight in the face with an expression I'd never seen on her daughter-in-law's face before, a look of utter contempt and disgust. "We're finished, Derek. Did you hear me? I said this marriage is over." She turned her back, strode decisively out of the meeting room, and slammed the door shut without a single glance back, leaving Derek staring after the closed wooden door. A smart and decisive woman, I thought to myself. She knew exactly when the best time was to cut her losses and save her life before sinking with the rest of the ship. "So what do you really want from us now?" Derek finally broke the silence. His voice had completely changed. The glitz and glamour of a professional salesperson had vanished without a trace, replaced by a deep, hoarse, bitter, and defeated tone. "Money? Or is this actually a sophisticated blackmail scheme from you? Because if you think extortion..." I almost let out a sarcastic laugh, a hoarse sound escaping from my throat, but sounding more like a mother's choked helpless sob than a genuine laugh. "Do you really think this mother is doing all this for money, Derek? My son, are you ready to stand by and watch your own mother, who bore you, raised you, and endure excruciating physical pain just to steal an estate that she would willingly sign over to you after she dies. Do you truly understand how sick, deviant, and rotten your actions are? Mother, please listen to my explanation. He rushed forward towards the table, reaching out to grab my hand in plea. I immediately pulled my hand back, stepping back in my chair. Don't touch me. You absolutely must not touch me with those dirty hands again. Nicole was completely broken, sobbing uncontrollably, her tears smudging her face and smearing her thick black mascara. We know we were wrong, Mom. We truly know we made a mistake. Please forgive us this time. We promise to do everything we can to make amends. I swear, Mom. We will fix it. I turned to look directly at my youngest daughter's tearful face, my heart aching but my eyes remained cold. Nicole, you stood there and watched your mother suffer. You know very well how much pain she's in. You know she's suffering from insomnia. She can't walk. She can barely maintain the most basic human needs. And yet you have not a shred of compassion. Even worse and more heartless. The child actively participated, acting as an accomplice in the plan. The child nonchalantly visits the mother's house, calmly sits on the mother's sofa, eats meals bought with the mother's money, and puts on a show of feigned concern and filial piety, while the child's brain is plotting day and night to destroy and send this mother to a mental institution. Attorney Patricia then stepped forward, standing between me and the two children, her voice full and carrying a strong legal deterrent. I would like to inform you all that Ms. Patterson has also filed a report detailing this entire behavior, along with accompanying audio evidence, with the California State Department for the Protection of the Elderly and her private physician. She has also formally filed a criminal complaint with the local police regarding the theft of controlled substances, whether or not to pursue criminal charges to bring them to trial rests entirely with Ms. Patterson, but legally, she has every right and solid legal basis to do so immediately. Derek jumped up from his chair abruptly, his face flushed with anger and fear. This is insane. Are you really going to destroy it? Are you planning to throw your own children in jail and destroy this family, just because of this trivial misunderstanding? I didn't destroy anything, Derek. I looked him straight in the eyes, calmly and decisively replying. It was you two who single-handedly shattered this entire family, who severed the mother-son bond from the moment you both unanimously decided that your mother's physical pain was a price, a perfectly acceptable form of collateral to satisfy your insatiable greed. After all that we've done, all the sacrifices we've made for you all this time, what you've done for me, you secretly stole my painkillers. You conspired to seize all of my life's savings. You were ready to use coercive measures to send me to a mental institution, if I dared resist. Objectively speaking, what good have you done for your mother's life, Derek? He fell silent, his mouth agape, unable to utter a single word of justification. Nicole was the same. She could only bury her face in the conference table, her shoulders trembling with each helpless sob into her hands. I think we can end our meeting here, Lawyer Patricia said decisively, gesturing towards the door of the meeting room. You may now leave. All the new estate documents and the irrevocable trust agreement of Mrs. Patterson have been officially signed, authenticated, and are fully effective. From this moment onward, any attempt or action on your part to claim or dispute property in the future will immediately result in our law office handing over this entire original audio recording to the prosecutor's office as strong criminal evidence of elder abuse and violence. My two children silently walked out of the meeting room, unable to utter another word. Derek was the first to rush out the door, his face contorted with anger and bitterness. Nicole lingered for a few brief seconds, crying and trying to turn back to look at me, opening her mouth to apologize, trying to find a final explanation, but to me at that moment, those words were completely empty and meaningless. Their nature had always been empty and hypocritical. When their shadows completely disappeared behind the meeting room door and the space returned to its usual quiet, I sat silently in my armchair, looking out the large window at the blue San Diego sky. I suddenly realized I was experiencing a feeling I hadn't felt in months. A profound peace, a serenity of soul. Are you really all right, Mrs. Patterson? Patricia gently approached, placed a hand on my shoulder, and asked kindly, "I'm sure I'll be all right, lawyer." I smiled, a genuine smile from the bottom of my heart, and I completely believed it. Throughout the long weeks that followed, Derek tried to call me a few times, but I calmly rejected his calls and blocked his number completely. Nicole kept sending handwritten letters begging for forgiveness, but I unceremoniously returned them to the post office without opening a single word. They had made cruel, selfish choices for themselves, and now they had to learn to accept and live with the obvious consequences of their own actions. I caused it. I hired a locksmith to replace all the locks on the house. I changed the entire combination to the anti-theft security system. I made sure my daily medication was securely stored in a safe with a personal combination lock. And this beloved house was once again truly my own independent property. Emma called me, sobbing on the phone and pressing me to tell her what terrible thing had happened between me and her mother. I calmly chose my words to tell her the brutal truth. But of course, not all the darkest details. I didn't want a kind-hearted girl like her to carry such a heavy psychological burden, such a great shame about the previous generation, for the rest of her life. But what I told her was just enough for her to understand the whole story. I can't. I knew absolutely nothing about this crazy plan, Mrs. Patterson. I swear to God I knew absolutely nothing about the dirty tricks they were pulling behind your back. She turned to look Derek straight in the face with an expression I'd never seen on her daughter-in-law's face before, look of utter contempt and disgust. "We're finished, Derek. Did you hear me? I said this marriage is over." She turned her back, strode decisively out of the meeting room, and slammed the door shut without a single glance back, leaving Derek staring after the closed wooden door. A smart and decisive woman, I thought to myself. She knew exactly when the best time was to cut her losses and save her life before sinking with the rest of the ship. "So what do you really want from us now?" Derek finally broke the silence. His voice had completely changed. The glitz and glamour of a professional salesperson had vanished without a trace, replaced by a deep, hoarse, bitter, and defeated tone. "Money? Or is this actually a sophisticated blackmail scheme from you? Because if you think extortion..." I almost let out a sarcastic laugh, a hoarse sound escaping from my throat, but sounding more like a mother's choked, helpless sob than a genuine laugh. "Do you really think this mother is doing all this for money, Derek? My son, are you ready to stand by and watch your own mother, who bore you, raised you, and endure excruciating physical pain just to steal an estate that she would willingly sign over to you after she dies? Do you truly understand how sick, deviant, and rotten your actions are? Mother, please listen to my explanation." He rushed forward towards the table, reaching out to grab my hand in plea. I immediately pulled my hand back, stepping back in my chair. "Don't touch me. You absolutely must not touch me with those dirty hands again." Nicole was completely broken, sobbing uncontrollably, her tears smudging her face and smearing her thick black mascara. "We know we were wrong, Mom. We truly know we made a mistake. Please forgive us this time. We promise to do everything we can to make amends. I swear, Mom, we will fix it." I turned to look directly at my youngest daughter's tearful face, my heart aching, but my eyes remained cold. "Nicole, you stood there and watched your mother suffer. You know very well how much pain she's in. You know she's suffering from insomnia. She can't walk. She can barely maintain the most basic human needs. And yet you have not a shred of compassion. Even worse and more heartless. The child actively participated, acting as an accomplice in the plan. The child nonchalantly visits the mother's house, calmly sits on the mother's sofa, eats meals bought with the mother's money, and puts on a show of feigned concern and filial piety, while the child's brain is plotting day and night to destroy and send this mother to a mental institution. Attorney Patricia then stepped forward, standing between me and the two children, her voice full and carrying a strong legal deterrent. "I would like to inform you all that Ms. Patterson has also filed a report detailing this entire behavior, along with accompanying audio evidence, with the California State Department for the Protection of the Elderly and her private physician. She has also formally filed a criminal complaint with the local police regarding the theft of controlled substances, whether or not to pursue." Criminal charges to bring them to trial, rests entirely with Miss Patterson, but legally. She has every right and solid legal basis to do so immediately. Derek jumped up from his chair abruptly, his face flushed with anger and fear. This is insane. Are you really going to destroy it? Are you planning to throw your own children in jail and destroy this family just because of this trivial misunderstanding? I didn't destroy anything, Derek. I looked him straight in the eyes, calmly and decisively replying. It was you two who single-handedly shattered this entire family. Who severed the mother-son bond from the moment you both unanimously decided that your mother's physical pain was a price. A perfectly acceptable form of collateral to satisfy your insatiable greed. After all that we've done. All the sacrifices we've made for you all this time. What you've done for me. You secretly stole my painkillers. You conspired to seize all of my life's savings. You were ready to use coercive measures to send me to a mental institution if I dared resist. Objectively speaking, what good have you done for your mother's life, Derek? He fell silent, his mouth agape, unable to utter a single word of justification. Nicole was the same. She could only bury her face in the conference table, her shoulders trembling with each helpless sob into her hands. I think we can end our meeting here, Lawyer Patricia said decisively, gesturing towards the door of the meeting room. You may now leave. All the new estate documents and the irrevocable trust agreement of Mrs. Patterson have been officially signed, authenticated, and are fully effective. From this moment onward, any attempt or action on your part to claim or dispute property in the future will immediately result in our law office handing over this entire original audio recording to the prosecutor's office as strong criminal evidence of elder abuse and violence. My two children silently walked out of the meeting room, unable to utter another word. Derek was the first to rush out the door, his face contorted with anger and bitterness. Nicole lingered for a few brief seconds, crying and trying to turn back to look at me, opening her mouth to apologize, trying to find a final explanation, but to me at that moment, those words were completely empty and meaningless. Their nature had always been empty and hypocritical. When their shadows completely disappeared behind the meeting room door and the space returned to its usual quiet, I sat silently in my armchair. Looking out the large window at the blue San Diego sky, I suddenly realized I was experiencing a feeling I hadn't felt in months, a profound peace, a serenity of soul. Are you really all right, Mrs. Patterson? Patricia gently approached, placed a hand on my shoulder, and asked kindly. I'm sure I'll be all right, lawyer. I smiled, a genuine smile from the bottom of my heart, and I completely believed it. Throughout the long weeks that followed, Derek tried to call me a few times, but I calmly rejected his calls and blocked his number completely. Nicole kept sending handwritten letters begging for forgiveness, but I unceremoniously returned them to the post office without opening a single word. They had made cruel, selfish choices for themselves, and now they had to learn to accept and live with the obvious consequences of their own actions. I caused it. I hired a locksmith to replace all the locks on the house. I changed the entire combination to the anti-theft security system. I made sure my daily medication was securely stored in a safe with a personal combination lock. And this beloved house was once again truly my own independent property. Emma called me, sobbing on the phone and pressing me to tell her what terrible thing had happened between me and her mother. I calmly chose my words to tell her the brutal truth, but of course, not all the darkest details. I didn't want a kind-hearted girl like her to carry such a heavy psychological burden, such a great shame about the previous generation, for the rest of her life. But what I told her was just enough for her to understand the whole story. Thank you all so much for patiently listening to my entire story until these very last moments. I know this isn't an easy story to accept. It's filled with bitter truth about greed and betrayal from close relatives. But your presence here, listening and sharing the pain of an elderly mother like me, is an immense comfort. Sometimes, life's storms don't come from the outside, but begin within our own homes. I'm sharing this hidden aspect not to sow pessimism, but to send a profound warning. Always take control of your life. Protect yourself, and never let blind love cloud your judgment. Even with those you love most, If my story today can help or awaken someone out there, then the pain I've endured hasn't been in vain. Once again, thank you sincerely for your empathy and support. I wish you and your family peace, complete happiness, and the wisdom to face life's challenges. Goodbye and see you again.